Not everyone wakes up to a crisis. Some people wake up to something quieter, something slower, something far more dangerous. A dull heaviness. A feeling that today will look exactly like yesterday, and tomorrow will look exactly like today. That's where our story begins. A man in his late 50s, tall, slightly stooped, with tired eyes that once held ambition, stood before a chipped bathroom mirror. His name wasn't important. What mattered was the look on his face, the look of someone who realized he had stopped recognizing the person staring back at him. The mirror's surface was fogged from the shower, but even through the haze, he could see the truth. The deep lines beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way he lifted his shoulders as if bracing for impact every single morning. He whispered under his breath, "Why does every day feel exactly the same?" The house was silent too. Silent, the kind of silence that used to feel peaceful but now felt like a warning. He walked into the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The chair creaked as he sat. The same bowl. The same cereal. The same spoon. The same routine he had repeated for years. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't failure. It was something colder. Emptiness, wearing the mask of a normal life. He once had dreams, real ones. Finishing a novel, learning jazz guitar, running a half marathon before he turned 60. But somewhere between responsibility, exhaustion, and the slow gravity of adulthood, the dreams slipped to the back of the closet like old clothes he no longer felt worthy to wear. He tried to shake the feeling off. He checked his phone. Emails, notifications, endless noise. But the heaviness stayed. He opened the front door, stepped outside, and felt the cold morning air sting his cheeks. For a moment, he stood still, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't know where to go. He wasn't lost on a map. He was lost inside himself. Something inside him whispered faint, nearly gone. "You don't have many mornings left to waste." And so, without any real plan, without any grand intention, he started walking. Down the driveway, across the street, toward the small park he had passed 1,000 times but never truly seen. He didn't know it yet, but that ordinary morning, that dull, heavy, familiar morning, was about to collide with something extraordinary. Someone extraordinary. Someone sitting on an old wooden bench, waiting for him, and waiting to change everything. The next morning, the world felt different. Not because anything changed, but because something inside him was starting to shift. It was early. Too early for most people. The air was cold enough to pinch the skin, and the sky was still painted in that strange blue-gray that sits between night and day. The man, tired, worn, hopeful, without admitting it, stepped out of his house and walked toward the small park he always passed but never entered. For years, that park had been a background object in his life, like an old photograph on a wall he no longer noticed. But today, the fog was thicker, the silence heavier, and the world seemed to whisper something through the cold air. He followed the path toward the pond, the ground damp beneath his shoes, and the faint outline of a wooden bench slowly emerged from the mist. And then he saw him, a man far older than anyone he'd spoken to in months. Thin, quiet, still, as if time itself had paused around him. The old man sat with a paper cup of coffee cradled gently in both hands, steam rising like a thin ghost into the freezing morning air. There was no introduction, no awkward small talk, just a presence, calm, steady, unsettling in its simplicity. The younger man hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered himself onto the far end of the bench. For a while, they said nothing. The world around them breathed fog and silence. Then the old man spoke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a softness that felt heavier than any shout. "You look like you're carrying something." The younger man swallowed. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know why a stranger could see something he'd hidden from everyone else. Finally, he whispered, "Life gets heavy." The old man nodded, staring at the water. "Life is always heavy," he murmured. "But heaviness isn't what breaks us. What breaks us is walking in the wrong direction without realizing it." The younger man frowned slightly. "No direction? I have a job. I have responsibilities. I have a routine." The old man turned to him, eyes sharp yet gentle. "That's not direction," he said. "That's motion. The difference between moving and moving towards something." Struck the younger man like cold water. The old man took a sip of coffee, then added, "You don't need a dramatic change. You don't need to fix your life overnight. You only need one small habit that points you forward. Something so small it feels almost stupid. But it will pull you out of the fog." The younger man looked out at the pond, fog swirling like a giant breath across the water. For the first time in years, he felt the faint spark of a direction. Not a map, not a full plan, just a faint pull toward someplace better. And that was enough for now. Enough to take the next step. Enough to begin. Michael didn't remember the exact morning it happened. There was no dramatic music, no revelation, no thunderbolt of inspiration. Just a quiet moment, the kind that passes by unnoticed unless you're paying attention. He woke up before his alarm. For the first time in years, the house was silent. The kind of silence that feels soft rather than empty. He sat on the edge of his bed, feet touching the cold floor, realizing something unusual. He wanted to move, not because he had to, not because he felt guilty, but because a part of him, a part he thought had died long ago, was waking up again. He stepped outside. Morning air brushed against his face, cool and honest. He began walking his usual 5-minute loop, but something in his body leaned forward, gently pulling him farther. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 15. And halfway down the street, he caught himself smiling this small, involuntary smile of quiet disbelief. It wasn't the distance. It wasn't the speed. It was the feeling of returning to himself. Later that day, while cleaning a drawer, Michael found something unexpected, his old journal. The one he used to carry everywhere, back when he still believed in possibility. The cover was worn, and the pages smelled faintly like time. He flipped it open. Inside were fragments of dreams he once had. A list of places he wanted to visit, a rough sketch of the book he once promised himself he would write. A sentence he had scribbled on a page in big letters. "Do not let the days blur together." He ran his fingers over the ink, old, cracked, but still legible. And for the first time in years, that sentence didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a challenge. That evening, instead of watching television, he sat down with a pen. Not to write a masterpiece. Not to prove anything. Just to take one small step. He wrote a single sentence. "Today, I did not disappear." Then he closed the journal gently, the way one closes a door they intend to open again tomorrow. The next day, the walks became slightly longer. His breathing grew easier. He found himself humming without meaning to. He laughed at something small, something he might have ignored before. Across the days and weeks, these quiet victories accumulated like drops of water filling a glass. And one morning, while making coffee, Michael realized something astonishing. He no longer felt like a man trying to escape his life. He felt like someone slowly building a new one. Not with grand gestures, not with perfect discipline, but with small, consistent choices, the kind that seem meaningless until they're the only thing holding your soul together. He didn't know it yet, but momentum had begun. And once momentum starts, it doesn't whisper for long. Michael didn't notice the exact day things shifted. There was no dramatic moment, no triumphant music, no breakthrough scene like in the movies. But something inside him quietly changed. One morning, as he walked his usual path, now longer, now smoother, now somehow inviting, he realized he wasn't fighting himself anymore. His feet moved naturally. His breath felt steady. His mind felt clearer than it had in years. For the first time, the world didn't feel heavy. It felt open. He started waking up before the alarm, not out of anxiety, but out of curiosity. He began stretching his arms toward the morning light, letting it warm his skin before the day began. Small rituals, simple ones, but they made him feel human again. And then, something unexpected happened. A neighbor he often passed on the trail stopped him one morning. "You look different," she said. "Not thinner, not stronger, just different, like someone who had returned from somewhere far away." Michael laughed softly because she wasn't wrong. He had traveled not miles, but inward, into the parts of himself he had ignored for decades. His doctor noticed too. At his next checkup, the numbers were better. The blood pressure, the cholesterol, the stress markers. Even his posture had changed, shoulders less tense, eyes less defeated. "Whatever you're doing," his doctor said, "keep going." And those words echoed through him, not as praise, but as permission. Permission to continue. Permission to become someone new. One small step at a time. He found himself writing more in the evenings. Not because he forced himself to, but because the words flowed again. They felt alive again. He laughed more, smiled more, and when he walked, he no longer looked at the ground. He looked ahead. Momentum had taken over. And momentum, once it begins, is almost impossible to stop. In the quiet rhythm of his new routines, Michael discovered something shocking. He wasn't just improving his life, he was reclaiming it, piece by piece, habit by habit, day by day. And for the first time in a very long time, Michael felt like a man moving forward. Not running from the past, not chasing the future, but finally stepping fully into the life already waiting for him. A full year passed. Seasons shifted the way life often does, quietly, without asking permission. Winter softened into spring. Spring grew into summer. And summer, warm and golden, slowly stepped aside for the calm of early fall. In that entire time, the middle-aged man, the man who once woke each morning feeling like he was drowning in repetition, had changed more than he believed possible. Not because life had suddenly become easy, not because circumstances magically improved, but because he had learned something deeper. Small habits build roads, and roads take you to places you thought you'd never reach. He still had hard days. He still felt fear. He still carried old memories of failure. But now, he carried something stronger, a quiet belief in himself. And so, on a cool September morning, he returned to the place where everything began. The fog-covered park, the shimmering pond, the old wooden bench with chipped paint and carvings from strangers, who once needed a moment of stillness just like he did. The air was crisp, breath visible in front of him, leaves barely starting to turn. The world, somehow, felt both ancient and newborn. He walked toward the bench slowly, as if greeting an old friend. No one was sitting there, especially not the elderly man whose gentle words had once cracked open something inside him. He looked around the park, at the pond, the path, the golden sun breaking through the trees, and felt a strange mix of sorrow and gratitude. He sat, closed his eyes, let the cool wind brush his face, let his lungs fill with air that somehow felt heavier and lighter at the same time. After a long moment, he whispered into the morning, "Small habits, every day." It wasn't just a motto anymore. It was truth. It was proof. It was the quiet engine that had rebuilt his life. One step, one page, one breath at a time. He remembered something the old man said during their first conversation. People think they need a new life, but what they really need is to meet themselves again. And sitting there, on that same bench, facing that same pond, bathed in unfamiliar sunlight, he realized with quiet certainty he had met himself again, and he liked the man he found. He stood up, took one last look at the water glistening like liquid gold, and began walking down the path. Not fast, not slow, but steady. The kind of steady that comes from finally knowing where you're going. And as the camera pulls away, leaves drifting across the frame, the morning sun rising behind him, the lesson becomes clear. Soft, simple, and powerful. Your life does not need perfection. It needs direction. It needs movement. It needs one small habit, repeated until it becomes who you are.